And welcome back, everyone. We now in this segment are going to be talking about the man on your screen, Governor Christie here, giving a defiant denial yesterday that he knew nothing about the lane closures and that he had no role in them. He went on to say a few more things, but the thrust of it is there's nothing to see here. The folks that were responsible for it have been terminated or have resigned. But let's get more on that right now. And we're very pleased to be joined from the record with Melissa Hayes. And Melissa, you saw the governor's performance yesterday. To me, I think there's still a distinction with a difference, and maybe you can elaborate on it. His claim, and no one has alleged that he was involved personally in the planning of those lane closures, and he reiterated that yesterday. However, that's different than when he did that nearly 2-hour press conference and said the first time he heard about it was through media reports. David Wildstein and some others have said, wait a minute, between the closures and between his acknowledgement, there was a gap of time. What we want to know is what happened in between there. Is that the focus you think that the legislature and the feds are really going to be honed in on?
Well, I'll be curious to see what they do, but I thought it was interesting that Christie, for the first time yesterday, acknowledged that he might have heard about traffic in September. He had previously always said he didn't hear about the lane closures until a Wall Street Journal report, which came out on October 2nd, and he maintained last night that he still hadn't heard about the lane closures specifically, but that now he may have heard about traffic. And that's interesting because David Wildstein's attorney on Friday said evidence exists that Christie knew about the closures when they were happening. So maybe this is Christie's way of trying to explain that he had heard traffic reports or maybe read about some traffic jams in the paper, but he said last night that didn't really alarm him or make him question anything. There's traffic at the bridge all the time.
Curious, were you surprised at all as to how the governor went after Wildstein, literally his behavior in social studies class and what he did at the paper? It seemed, I mean, maybe par for the course with how he described him and how he said, I was on the teams and I was the class president. I don't know what circles he traveled with. But there was a level of not just pettiness, but there was also a clear attack here on somebody who claims at least that he knows of the existence of evidence that puts, in fact, Christie's fingerprints on the story.
Sure. Well, I mean, Christie has been working very hard to distance himself from Wildstein. Going back to that January 9th news conference in the State House, he completely dismissed any idea that they were old high school friends. That's when he said they didn't, they weren't in the same circles. Although we've seen photos since then that show Wildstein and Christie together at times when Christie said he hadn't seen Wildstein in months. So there are a lot of questions about their relationship and how much they really were in contact. It was interesting how much he went after him. He actually cited a profile piece that we wrote about Wildstein. I'm curious kind of to see maybe if Wildstein comes back at Christie and, kind of defends their relationship or something along those lines.
To that end, we did get some news today, Bridget Kelly among others, that are pleading the fifth. While maybe that's not a huge surprise, there is definitely two different strategies at play here, whether it be Wildstein or Bridget Kelly. Give an idea, if you know, what the folks on the investigative committees here, Wisniewski and others, what they're hoping to find still from her, whether immunity deals may or may not be on the table for these principals, and also maybe what they've learned from some of the documents they got through the subpoenas already.
Sure, they're not saying anything about the documents they've received so far from this latest round of subpoenas. We did find out today that they did get some documents, though the vast majority of people have been granted extensions. Governor Christie said last night his office has started to turn over documents. We have no idea what they say. But what I thought was interesting was both Bridget Kelly's attorney and Bill Stepien, Christie's former campaign manager, both their attorneys said in letters that they wouldn't be supplying information because there's an ongoing federal investigation and they didn't want to incriminate themselves, although Stepien's attorney maintained his innocence. And her attorney told us that she hasn't been subpoenaed by the federal investigators, so it seems like maybe they're concerned that if they turned over documents, they could be used in a federal investigation. So we have a lot of questions about how anything obtained by the committee could also be used in this federal investigation. I think the biggest question, though, is does Bridget Kelly have some sort of answer as to why she sent this email, time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee? And if she doesn't turn over documents, we might never know, the basis for that email. So they're exploring their legal options to see how they can make her comply, or if there's anything they can do to try and get this information out of her.
Finally, regarding not just Bridget Kelly, but others, Melissa, we talked to Assemblyman Wisniewski yesterday about the scope of the investigation. You say, hey, listen, this thing's already changed a few times from when this started to where it is now. Is there a belief that there'll be more mayors to come forward that said or alleged that there could have been quid pro quo, similar to what Don Zimmer said, that, hey, if we didn't make certain political allowances, we weren't going to see Sandy funding, et cetera, et cetera? Will that be part of the investigation as well, you believe?
Well, we did ask specifically about the Hoboken aspect becoming part of the investigation, and for now they said they're focused on the lane closures and getting to the bottom of that. I think they kind of left it open as to whether or not they could include Hoboken down the line or maybe do a separate investigation into that. But for right now, they say they're focused on the lane closures specifically. There was also allegations by the mayor of Jersey City, Steve Fulop, that meetings with state officials were canceled after he declined to endorse the governor. So maybe that's something that could come into play down the line, too, if they decide to explore Zimmer's allegations.
Well, Melissa Hayes has been covering the story with The Record and will continue to do so, and we really appreciate a few minutes on this Tuesday night. Melissa, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's bring in our panel right now. We got Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU. He's known a few investigations in Albany. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, of course. And O'Brien Murray here, a Republican strategist and co-founder of New York Meeting. All right, want to get into the investigative stuff first, Richard. Two different approaches, obviously. David Wildstein taking one, his attorney putting out a document. The beginning of the document's like, why aren't we getting any legal funds? And then it says, we know of the existence of evidence that points to an involvement of Christie. There's vagueness to it, but certainly saying that there was untruths in the press conference that the governor conducted without specificity. Yet you see Bridget Kelly and others already invoking the fifth. What's going on behind the scenes? Well, is this about immunity and the feds?
There is an immunity issue here. It's Oliver North who was convicted of perjury, and then that conviction was reversed, if you'll recall, because he had testified in front of the Congress, and that tainted, they said, the investigation. So you could speculate, which I don't like to do, but let's do it, that the Wildstein stuff is trolling for some sort of immunity bath, where he alleges the existence of evidence, gets immunity, and then produces it or doesn't. The best thing everyone can do here is give this investigation time to roll out. The documents will tell you more than the back and forth about who remembers what, because the documents will be what is most likely to be powerful evidence if it comes to a criminal or civil
action. When an investigation like this happens, do the documents have to be, do you need documents produced from the equivalents of the Bridget Kellys and the other principals, the Sepians, or can you get them without going through them by just going through some of, obviously, document dumps that you're going to...
Well, you got to get them from somebody.
Yeah.
And you need the documents. And the real problem is that most of the time it's not so much they withhold documents, it's that they bury the treasure in a stack 40,000 documents deep. When I subpoenaed documents on the Yankee Stadium deal, what they would do, what the Bloomberg people did, was they, every time there was a new email, they reprinted the entire email chain. So there were 40 emails, you got 40 chains of emails right down to the bottom, which made it much harder to go through all the documents.
But if they didn't give that to you, you'd complain about it.
No, I wouldn't. Don't tell me what I would do.
Richard, you asked for it, you got it.
No, I didn't ask for 40 copies of an email chain each time. The point of it is that the documents are going to tell the story, not
and it's going to take not days or weeks. What I want to do is I want to hit a quick break, and we're going to continue this conversation on the other side of it, Obi. And what I want to know is the key question we're going to hopefully get here, because I think we're missing a little bit of the forest from the trees. The governor could be 100% right when he says, I didn't know anything about the plan to lead to the lane closures. But that's not the standard that he drew, I believe, when he did that press conference and said, the first time I ever heard about any of this was when the media reported it. We're going to get into timeline and the relevant questions after this quick commercial break. Stay with us.